God dwells in you. Let us pray. Most holy and loving God, great creator, giver of all good gifts, we thank you for the gift of this moment in time. We thank you for the great abundant gift of life and of giving us to one another in your church to share that life. We ask you to be among us as a spirit of wisdom, be among us as a spirit of courage, be among us as a spirit of joy. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So this is a forum I've been looking forward to ever since I met our guest, Dr. Mikala Rahn. I haven't been here a very long time. I've only been here a little more than a year. And during that year, what I have tried to notice is a couple things. First of all, who are the people who don't just talk a good game, but who actually live it? And second, who are the people who really get that Jesus is about joy? And Dr. Mikala Rahn is absolutely one of those people. She has a background in statistical analysis, am I getting that correctly? And she has taken that into developing it's more than just a school, it's a charter school called Learning Works. I'm going to let her tell the story behind it. But it really is a whole sort of multifaceted community that is around taking amazing, amazing young people whom the rest of society has discarded and recognizing that this is an amazing resource and developing a program that just draws the natural gifts and beauty out of these young people. And so we have been wanting to find a time to bring her here to tell the story of Learning Works, but also just to kind of all of us together kick around some ideas of what transformation of poverty might look like in our own city. And so I'd ask you to please welcome Dr. Mikala Rahn. And so now that I've belched you up like that, can you just kind of tell us this? I mean, I've been amazed in the time I've spent at Learning Works and Grow Works and Community Works and Public Works and whatever else works. Can you just tell the story of where this came from and what it is and how it came to be?
So, hello everyone. I feel like I'm with All Saints family here because a lot of you have been supporters of Learning Works and me, and so thank you for loving me and loving what we do. Learning Works was really a wilderness chapter. I mean, when you really look at it, I thought I was going this way, and God said, sorry, you're going to go absolutely left. And in those moments, and all of us get them, you either go left or you just keep fighting with God, and it's usually better to go left. So I was a researcher, very happy researching high school dropouts and looking at the pyramid structures of high school where people start at 9th grade, and then there's this tip of 12th graders that make it to the end. And in some communities in LA, that's over 50%. And what was happening at that point in my life was they started to show up at my door, the high school dropouts. So I was studying it and living it. And I started to ask the question in Pasadena, do we really have high school dropouts? And at that point, we were at 24.6%. And so when I was studying them and when they were showing up was a complete crash of the world I knew, because they were then living on my couches and I was going to court with them and I'm learning about gangs and all of a sudden I'm into what's drug addiction and people have babies, and then I meet Dominic Corey, those of you that know him, and so now I'm on, okay, what do you do with strikes and things like that? So it was a true wilderness, and my son, God bless him, who's here today, got to, sort of witness a transformational mom. But these were moments where you're on the ground going, what the heck, God? What the heck? Poverty exists like this? And so then we ended up chartering it. So we tried to do this with the school district. I'm not a big pro-charter person. We can have another conversation on that. But in this case, it's a learning lab for change. It's a way in which to address youth that weren't being addressed in the system. We're recovering high school dropouts, which isn't a drain on the district. They're not collecting ADA. They don't really know what to do with them anyway. I was trying to take them back to class in November, and the teachers would say, bring them back at the February 1st when the semester changes. And you're like, what do I do with them for 3 months? So it needs a completely different approach to these kids, and now we are in our 10th year. We've graduated over 700 kids that wouldn't have graduated, and we just got renewed on Thursday, so it's fun.
So talk about the approach that you've discovered and that you're using and that has these remarkable results.
So the approach is, when you say it, it seems so simple, and yet public systems don't know how to do this. So our approach is unconditional love, non-judgment, fresh start. So we have a set of principles that I developed actually with Dominic and Carlos Cruz when he comes, that basically take the person and say, you have made mistakes, but your character, we make people good and bad guys, right? You are the person that God created, and we're going to start over. So let's fresh start and go. And what happens is we have to start over and over and over again, right? Because these are kids with lots of trauma, lots of damage. They don't believe you'll fresh start them, so they'll test that. And so we use a set of principles to hug, embrace, and create community. And then we have a set of chasers, and chasers chase kids. Every teacher has a chaser. And the chasers literally do that. They mentor, parent, tutor, take you to doctor appointments, but their sole job is to get you to the graduation. I don't believe anyone in this country should not graduate with a high school diploma. It doesn't make any sense to me. So for me, it's a justice issue. That's what we're on.
So what I love about the whole model that you have about the unconditional love, but also about the way that love is expressed, is not from a distance. It is just getting down with the kids right where they are. And when I think of what incarnation is, what I think of who Jesus is, it just resonates with me so much. And one of the things I love about you is that it's all about Jesus for you. And so can you sort of talk about where this meets your faith and how that, what part of it is?
So I don't think I was as close to Jesus before this. So it was an unfamiliar territory. God was very real to me. Yeah. Faith was very real to me. But what this forced me to do in my wilderness is hold on to really simple beliefs. So when you're in complication, simpler is better. They say things like, it's all about love. Well, guess what? It's all about love. Right? I mean, it's not that hard. So simpler was better for me. So I started to really think through the question, which again, sounds simple. What would Jesus do? It was just that simple. So when I'm at a cocktail party and I'm with my family and someone's getting arrested and I can get there and get him unarrested, you leave the cocktail party. Right. You go to the arrest. So this chapter was chaos because everybody's looking at me like I'm foolish and crazy and ungrounded. 10 years later, I'm the same person, and I'm not looking that foolish anymore. I don't know what happened. It's everybody else's lens changed of who I am. But you literally, in very complicated situations, you just go simple. And so if I'm in a big meeting right now, and I get a text that someone is in pain, someone's humiliated, someone's angry, it's very simple. What would Jesus do? Boom, stop the meeting, go. It's just those kinds of things got created in those situations where I was connecting to people's hearts and turning off the brain, which then makes it a lot simpler.
I'm struck by the parallels between your approach and what you do at Learning Works and someone else that we're starting to get to know, who's Becca Stevens, and she has a community called Thistle Farms in Nashville, and it's springing up around the country, which is a residential community for women who have histories of sexual exploitation, prostitution, violence, and drug abuse. And part of how Becca describes setting up Magdalene Thistle Farms is just going by the simple principle that love heals. And also recognizing that there are so many things that we can tend to look at and our first response is, oh, but I couldn't do that. And instead realizing, well, actually, I can.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like stopping the meeting and going. And one of the things that Becca has opened me up to is, you know, even though like I'm globally one of the top 1% in terms of wealth and power on this planet, that I'm so encouraged so often to adopt a scarcity mentality and be concentrating on how little I can do instead of how much I can do. And yet everything that you talk about is about this sort of philosophy and theology of abundance. And first I want to know what you think about that. Am I getting it right? And secondly, if I am, how do we foster that in ourselves and each other?
So I think we get caught on big action, like what can I change? What can I don't like this policy, or I don't like this system. Mm-hmm. And I just think, again, it's smaller than that. I mean, when you look at the stories of Jesus, they were very one-on-one. They were very individualized. And there was lots of noise around the stories, right? Lots of people pointing fingers or talking about him behind his back, or right? I mean, but what would he do? He would just be in that moment, in that relationship. And in that moment, in that relationship, there's a ripple effect. There's a change. If we believe we're a collective body, that we're parts of a whole, then in those individual relationships, those heart connections, something's happening. So for me, the abundance starts with when I am with people, trying to see their strengths, their beauty. I envision when I have an ugly child in front of me, I have many at times where they're angry, I take them to where they're 5. Because they probably didn't look like this scary thing at 5. They were someone we would have loved and played with on the ground, right? So those individual relationships create this spark to me of hope that I'm getting something back that's giving to me, they're giving back. And to me, that's abundance. That's just beautiful. And so I've never then, maybe since this transformation, it really was a transformation, I've never thought in deficit anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't think in competition. I think we're all a collective. And so in order for me to grow, you grow others and you grow yourself at the same time.
So, I mean, you use the word transformation, and transformation is a journey. And so I wonder if you could go back to talk to yourself at maybe not a beginning point, but an early point in that transformation. Yeah. What would you say to yourself?
Well, I mean, I think, I look back in college and how I grew up, and, I grew up poor, but not poor like these kids, poor, different poor. There was a lot of judgment. There was a lot of, like, what the heck am I doing, and how do I embrace this? And people will say that to me now. Like, I've been to court for people who have murdered people, attempted murder, and murder. And, to me, that person is still the person I connected with before and would during. And so the transformation is, I think, becoming comfortable enough with the unknowns and completely letting that judgment go. Meaning, it's not my job to decide if someone is doing something right or wrong. Mm-hmm. It is my job to love that person to a new place. And that love will bring me to a new place. So I think it's something we can all stretch ourselves on, is catching our judgments. We all have them. We have all biases, and racism's alive and well, sexism is alive and well. So how do we sort of like do that work to catch ourselves when that work is going on? Because when it's going on, if you're with someone, it's going on, then you're really not in the spirit of love and, you know, just sort of kinship, as Greg puts it, Father Greg. And that too is part of the transformation. As I'm growing and giving off abundance, who finds me? Father Greg. And so we're the school at Homeboy Industries in Boyle Heights. And so that then just expands. And I met Father Greg from a transformational journey at All Saints, the two of us were on. So I think you were there. So I didn't know about Homeboys at all, but then when you're thinking expansive, you're thinking abundance, then through an All Saints transformational journey, that's how I met Greg, and that's the story of how that moved forward.
And so now you're working with a new role with Homeboy right now. What are you doing with them right now?
I'm excited about it. It'll be fun. They have expanded their education lens. So I'm called the chief. I don't know what the heck that means. I think it's funny. So chief of education and research at Homeboy Industries. So I'm got basically dual roles at LearningWorks and Homeboy. But it makes sense because I've been with Homeboy for, I guess, 6 or 7 years now. So it just expands the work. So
you've been immersed in this work for more than a decade. And we called this forum The Changing Face of Poverty in Pasadena. What do you see? What do you see changing? What is the changing face of poverty in this community?
So, I mean, Pasadena and our work has changed considerably, but one of the biggest pressures in Pasadena is housing. So we don't really like poverty in this town. I'm sorry. It's just, we just don't like the poor, and we hide them, and I don't know where that started. I don't know if that was the tournament, the Rose Parade, all the roses. I don't know what happened. But somehow this town decided that we weren't poor and rich, and we are, and yet the poor demographic has definitely shrunk. It's affected the schools, it's affected housing, it's affected who's left, and how their poverty is almost worse than when we had more poor. So we end up now with what I would call a smaller, so there's the good side, it's a smaller pool, but what LearningWorks has become then is a county-wide program because people don't ever really leave Pasadena. So even if my gang member in Fontana still identifies with Pasadena, so it becomes larger zip codes, and that Pasadena becomes the relatives that are in other parts. The system of incarceration has changed for juveniles, and I think we think positively. I don't think positively, meaning we used to see all of our kids in court with a judge locally. Now, when you get a ticket, you might end up in Van Nuys. Carlos Cruz, my probation chaser, who goes to court with everybody, is everywhere now, which means they're getting more warrants because they can't get on a bus to go an hour away. So the whole thing has become more spread out and less holding the problem here, which is, it's a problem when you look writ large at how that affects the community and the economy.
Well, and it also seems like it creates a situation where a city like Pasadena can look at numbers and, look, we just did the homeless count here and say, oh, we have fewer people struggling with homelessness. And that might be true, but it actually doesn't tell the story of what's really happening in terms of the depth of poverty, and also how it really just is being moved around, not being eliminated.
Yes. Here's a great little dirty secret. So the census data is one of the ways people run poverty statistics and able to get grant funds and federal money. And so, Boyle Heights is great because the zip code tells you poor and you know what you're dealing with. In Pasadena, our poorest community in Northwest Pasadena, with the housing projects and what have you, guess what census tract they're attached to? The Rose Bowl community. So someone drew the lines in the census tract that put the projects and the poor people in Northwest with the rich people around the Rose Bowl. Guess what? When you run the statistics, we don't have poor people. Truth. Truth.
I don't even know how to follow up on that.
Oh, it made me so mad. It made me so mad. Like, because I'm like, wait a minute. Why does this not keep popping up? Like, how is it that we can't even go after grants in this town?
Mm-hmm. So you have a community like All Saints Church that historically has had a heart for being part of the solution. I was just at the Young and Healthy benefit last night, and Lorna's sitting here, and Don is here, and just has, there's a history in this community of impactful work. What do you see as the potential for All Saints Church in this new era that we're moving into?
So, one of the things that I guess I'm not that popular on this one, so I'll just try to do it. We like to make a lot of noise in Pasadena, but we don't always like to be with the populations we're making noise about. I just don't think you can affect change without knowing someone who's in jail. You can't fight mass incarceration if you don't have someone you're picking up the phone and answering their calls. You can't. I mean, if you're not letter writing with someone in jail, how do you know what to fight? I mean, if you're working on the homeless problem, if you're not, and I'm not saying surveying, if you don't know someone's name on the street that you're asking how you doing and bringing them a sandwich every once in a while, I don't know how you do homeless work. I really don't. I'm just saying. So why do we not do that? Because we're uncomfortable. Because it's scary. Why did people talk about Jesus? Because they didn't know how to do that work, right? So to me, it's about just breaking out of, just pick something that you're passionate about and sort of break through in that area to get more comfortable. Coming to terms with, we're all racist. We're all sexist. What level, what degree, whatever, that's your own personal story. Why you're at that point, own personal story. But not like owning our own transformation and all of that. Our own transformation is really, I think, where it's at. And this place is probably the best place in town that pushes people to do that kind of work. So I always say when someone says, what can I do for Learning Works? Come sit on my benches. Come talk to my kids. He's out there learning. So, yeah.
Well, no, and I just want to back that up. And the truth is, it took me, like, actually being sentenced to it by the court to get me to do it. And one of the things I struggle with is, I had to do that. I had to fill out those, it's like 12 hours of community service. I did it at GrowWorks, which is this great community garden. And first of all, there's something really therapeutic for me as someone who doesn't have to make a living with my hands in the dirt, putting my hands in the dirt, but also just being with these amazing young people. I started looking forward to it. And then as soon as I'd finished the community service, I literally need to go back and put it in my calendar and other things like that, because the rest of my life, which is really less important than that, will crowd it out. And so it absolutely is transformational. And so yet I've also struggled with, the things that I tell myself and that other people are holding me accountable for is this is what you actually have to be doing. But if I was a different person. I was becoming a different person in those weeks that I was going to GrowWorks every week, because I was being grounded in the life experience of those young people. And so the conversations I was having were just bubbling up at other times during the week. And if I'm not doing that on a regular basis, that's not happening.
Well, and that comes back to the Jesus of joy.
Yes.
Right? I mean, a lot of the stories at Learning Works are so painful, and yet there's so much laughter.
Oh my gosh.
So
we laughed all the time.
Laughter, because that is a tool from God, right? So if we see Jesus as this serious person, we've missed a whole part of Jesus. Jesus is joy. Jesus is love. Jesus is laughter. Jesus is the guy you wanted to be with because he was fun. That's the Jesus I love.
Yeah, well, and it's the same thing like working, like Jasmine Richards and Amber Wilson run Black Lives Matter Pasadena, and they do a freedom school, and they do all these amazing things with young people in Northwest Pasadena. And it's not about showing up and certainly not telling them what to do, because they're not having anything to do with that, and also because they're brilliant. It's just about showing up and being present and being in community and realizing that we are in community with, we're in community with each other, we just don't recognize it. Right. And so I want to just open this up for anyone here. Questions, comments, thoughts. We got a couple folks with microphones. Well, you do for the streaming. So yeah, if you could wait just till the mic gets to you. So, and then we have two over here I want to make sure we get to also. So let's do Elizabeth and Amy after.
Thanks for being here. Wonderful work. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to the specifics of the housing need as it relates to what you're doing and what some of the potential solutions are.
I don't know if we're too far down the road in Pasadena. I mean, you can't get Section 8. You can't barely get in line. They opened it up for a minute. So the rents are all going up. The buildings that we're building are price out teachers. So the real connection really would be, how do we nurture what's left? And how do we make sure that they have the services that they need? Because this has been going down this road for a long time, trying to make it unaffordable to live here. I mean, teachers can't live here. So if teachers can't live here, then poor people can't live here, right? So I have more hope of us embracing those that are left than I do about us turning the tide.
We've got two right here.
Thank you so much. I'm getting so much out of this. I don't live in Pasadena. I live in the San Fernando Valley and Encino and Sherman, and it has exploded. And honestly, I feel like, have they migrated to the valley? And if so, it's an honor to figure out how. But you know, Tent City, I mean, it is a different landscape than 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm wondering statistically if the valley, what the valley's numbers are, or if, I don't know if you know about that.
Well, where are we on the homeless count? Are we saying it's, I mean, it's obviously increasing. I mean, it's like, I keep getting these reports and I'm like, no, it's, you know, we can see it. So I will know more soon. And we feel it here in Pasadena as well. I'm sure you all, we're on the east side in Pasadena with LearningWorks, and they want them over there because they don't want them in the Playhouse District or anywhere there. So I don't think we know. I can tell you from a young adult perspective, we deal with homelessness much more now than we did 10 years ago. And that would be a variety of reasons. The family just, you know, breaking down and they don't have somewhere to go. But, you know, where are they going to live? At this point, I'm working with PCC. We're trying to come up with kind of a shelter. They're saying 15% of the PCC kids are homeless. So and that would mean sleeping in a car, couch surfing. You know, it's bad. It's bad.
Elizabeth? I think Elizabeth's over there, and then we have others. So,
being a non-graduate from Pasadena many years ago, I'm curious, did you have success in the graduation rate in Pasadena?
Oh, thanks. I'm so bad at bringing this up, and I should. So the high school dropout rate now in Pasadena is under 10%. So we are doing a good job, and that's what it should be. So if you're in an urban area and you have an alternative program, I've found there's not, lots of people come to visit us. I guess what we do is hard. I don't think it's rocket science. You just love people. But other communities should have an alternative program for kids that aren't making it in high school. And most places don't have something like, well, I haven't found a LearningWorks yet. But we've brought it down to 9.6% in the city, which is awesome.
I just wanted to add a little bit to what you were saying. It is actually very fortunate that we have, as you said, an alternative program, because Pasadena, well, any school district or any public system, as you mentioned, it not only I mean, you did say, well, sometimes they don't know how to do that, but they also have limitations on what they can do in terms of they got classroom sizes, you have to deal with lawsuits, I mean, all kinds of things, and it is very good that you have. So I don't know how much you work together with PUSD. I think you sort of touched on that, but I'm not clear about how extensive it is.
We just got a 7-0 vote positive on Thursday. They see us as a partner. I mean, they see us as part of their strategy in alternative ed. They get credit for the dropouts that we recover. If someone gets expelled in one of the schools, we take those kids who are expelled, and that gives them a local option to then eventually, hopefully, get back to school. One of the things that I think makes us different, and again, I don't want to say this about all charters because I don't think it's true, we just don't believe in liability. I'm a public school that doesn't believe in it, because if I believe in liability, right. Back to scarcity, then I'm not going to serve someone, or something's going to, then it's going to cloud my vision. And so you're right, most traditional systems don't even have that as an option to not believe in liability. But that's why we can do what we can do. And what we learned with the Chasers is, I need them on 24/7. I can't have no union rules. You can't go at 1 o'clock, it's over. No, I'm sorry. Someone's getting arrested at 11:30. Please go. Boom, he's in your load. So we do that.
Well, so yeah, talk more about that, because I bet that statement, more than anything else you've said, probably struck fear in the heart of some people.
I love it.
And so let's talk about fear, because one of the things we run up against continually is that we're supposed to be afraid of liability. And what I hear from you is the key to this joy that you're finding is kind of this fearlessness about liability. And so, I mean, can you just talk some more about that?
So it comes down to, if we want to go to the lingo, this whole mindfulness stuff, we're supposed to live in the moment. So if I'm worried about what's going to happen, then I'm not living presently now. And Jesus was very present. So again, all my characteristics of Jesus I hold in my head and my heart. So Jesus was now. He wasn't on, obviously the story didn't turn out great. I could get killed. I get it. But I'm saying he was about now. But that's how I want to live. Like, that's the joy of life now. And so it's not that my brain won't go there sometimes. But what do I say? I literally tell myself to stop it. Stop it. Knock it off now.
Right. There's absolutely a risk there.
Yes.
There's plenty of risk, and it's how you've chosen to live your life. And really what you're doing at Learning Works is creating a movement around a new way of living.
Yeah, I get in trouble with staff because I actually believe in people moving on. Yeah. Because if I want to do this as a bigger movement, then you want your teachers to end up in other schools, right? You want these beacon of lights out there. So I was transformed, and then I move on, right? And so to me, that's a positive. That's awesome. Like when someone says, "Hey, I'm going to go work in the jails." Yes, right? Because we want to have more beacons of light out there in the world.
Amen. Other questions? I think Edna's back there.
Mikala, hi. Having had the opportunity to visit both campuses, Boyle Heights on a transformational journey and Pasadena for Constitution Day, I'm wondering if you could speak to the differences. Obviously there's a size, and then of course Pasadena has the Growing Works. I'm wondering if Pasadena is more like a classroom experience, and then Boyle Heights is more one-on-one with a counselor, teacher?
So they're the same curriculum, the same experience. What I would say is there's a couple things that are different. I've been allowed in Pasadena to sort of pray harder, and other opportunities have come up, like the Rusnicks give me space to do Grow Works and an art studio. So there's more programming in Pasadena. On the other hand, in First Street, we have Homeboy, and we have Homeboy Industries as our partner, so that's a sort of a different kind of partnering. The way I actually describe the difference of the two sites is not really in structure and program, it's in student. So in Boyle Heights, you are living in poverty and you're surrounded by everybody living in poverty, so you don't even know how bad you got it. In Pasadena, you get on a bus and you drive by mansions. You're angry. You're angry. So the population is more grateful in one area and more angry in another area, and that's different work. The other thing that's different about the work is the gangs are coming to East Pasadena to a safe haven warehouse space. There, we're surrounded by, we're flat in the middle of it, where the adults don't behave, and so we've got people, we're in one gang territory and we're surrounded by 4 other gangs. So it's different work.
Others. Yeah, back. Tom, we got it. Keep your hand up. Yeah, there you go, thanks.
I'm just wondering, could you speak about trauma and mental illness in the population that you work with?
So there's a chapter in Greg's new book, Barking to the Choir, that's probably my favorite chapter. I don't know if he called it bad guy or good guy. Anybody know? Good. It talks about bad guys and good guys. So mostly what he talks about, though, is, bad guys are mentally ill. We use these labels about people when what we're talking about is trauma and mental illness. You don't go in a church and shoot up and you're normal. So what we're dealing with in poverty is more incidents in childhood. In a middle class, you can usually come up with in a classroom. A lot of kids are going through trauma now, but when you deal with my population, they've been abused. Someone has abandoned them. They just buried their aunt, and their brother has Down syndrome. You're just like, what? So the incidence of trauma and mental illness are greater in high poverty situations than when you go along the socioeconomic class. So what I always say, again, this is hard to understand, I know, for people that don't do this. So you just imagine everybody has a gun, right? Try to do that in your life. Imagine everybody has a gun. I mean that in your normal neighborhood. It changes how you treat people. Mm-hmm. You approach it with love. So that is trauma. You don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know why they're acting out. You don't judge it. You don't try to change it. You receive it. And you come at it with sympathy and mutuality.
Are there services available in your organization for them when they're needing any kind of additional support? Because I work in middle school and high schools, and I deal with it every day in Montebello area. So I've been seeing this for years. And these are some of the kids that who need programs like that basically when they get older. But the support on that end, we have it already, but in middle school there's so little going through all these traumas. They need to be ready to receive that love too, and that comes with a certain maturity and growth at this age towards high school, maybe second half of high school, when they're ready to start, buckling down and try to receive that love.
So yes and no. I think all of us struggle with receiving love, and yet the more trauma you have, the more, it's complicated. So we have therapeutic services. We've got all the homeboy wraparound services. But remember, Greg doesn't believe in service. So this is another one that's really, really hard to understand because we're very different. We are there not to serve. So you may be court appointed and have to have therapy, but our therapy is kind of a lot different than a traditional system. We believe change comes from being seen. And when you are seen, things start to happen. Your whole outlook changes. And so that is really a philosophy of being with people and loving people, and that the change is happening for both people. That doesn't mean we don't occasionally have the tradition. We have traditional services that are needed, but even those wouldn't look like normal services. My therapist does, what's her thing? Burrito lunch therapy. So burrito lunch therapy is a winner because you're just going to go have a burrito, right? And then you're going to go talk. So it's just different the way we approach things. And youth and young adults are different. They're not ready for that, for mental health.
You have time for one more, Margot.
As you've talked about working with dropouts, I was wondering, how young do you work with younger kids explicitly or just sort of incidentally because they're the sibling of a dropout? How young do you go and how young do you plan to go?
We have a middle school program and that's for 14. I think we've had 13. And these are, I don't know if Raul's here, he works with them. These are really damaged, right? And at that age, they have no hope. They're still living it. So like a 19-year-old can go couch surf. They can run away from this, right? A middle schooler is still not seeing any light. So it's very different work. And they're there and they're, mentored around. We do lots of field trips, lots of getting out there. But our goal is to return them to a regular school. And we have that goal in middle school and 9th grade and 10th grade. But what we find is if we return them and the system doesn't receive them, and they become ugly again, then they will end up back with us because we find them beautiful. We know that their behaviors are coming from some form of trauma.
Right. We got just a minute to wrap up. I want to give you a chance to tell us how we can support you and the work at Learning Works and Homeboy. How can we help? How can we be a part of this?
So I know you have a transformational journey coming up. If you're interested in this work, I would go on that. I definitely, if you're trying to figure out, this woman is a wacko, if you're trying to figure this out, I would read Greg's book. It's because that alone will give you an insight into this kind of approach to living, I guess, is the way to put it. We would love you to come over and mentor, or be at GrowWorks, or just email me, call me. Juliana's on our board.
Yes.
So Dominic Corey is Chaser for Life, but works for Portantino. So these are people that you can reach out to and say, how do I get engaged? And then you can send money. There.
How do you send money?
On my website, there's a donate button, and you can do that.
And what is your website?
LearningWorksCharter.com. You can even just Google LearningWorks, and it will come up. Any donation we get does not go to staffing. It's all for like shoes, homeless problems, anything that's a student need, and actually experiences for the kids.
So the people who are streaming right now could just go to LearningWorksCharter.com, open another window, and press donate and give. Do you have anything you want to add?
My name is Dominic. I have been with Mikala for 10, 11 years now. Me having 2 strikes, growing up in the juvenile justice system, and having a lady who not only invested in me but gave me an opportunity was transformative. When I first met her, we have mutual friends, and it was literally a 3-minute interview. And she gave me a job. And I started off at Learning Works chasing kids, and now I work for State Senator Anthony Portantino, and that just shows the growth that she has and how she believes in us. There are a lot of chasers that come from similar background that I have, and there used to be former students. So she walks it. She not only lives it, but she walks it. And I think that's what life is about. That's what Jesus was about. Some people can't imagine waking up and dealing with some of the kids that we dealt with, or that we deal with, where you have a 12-year-old girl that's pregnant, or kids that do want to come in and all they want to do is fight because they're going from group home to group home to group home. But when being a former educator or working in education, when you have an executive director that literally comes in and talks to the kids and hugs the kids and lets them know that we're going to do everything in the power to make sure that they graduate, that's what Learning Works is about. It's a no excuse type of place, and we eliminate every excuse that you could possibly think of. So she walks it, she talks it, and she lives it. So just thank you.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.